Welcome to the deep dive. We know you want the important info fast without getting lost in the weeds.
Yeah, totally get it.
So today we're looking at a really interesting poll. It digs into how Americans see some of the, well, pretty attention-grabbing things former President Trump has said he might do.
Right. This is based on a Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll. Pretty solid sample size, over 2,400 people.
And we're zoning in on three key areas from that poll. The idea of him seeking a third term, the whole deporting or imprisoning U.S. citizens abroad thing, and
Right.
even, well, taking control of Canada or Greenland.
Quite the list.
So our mission here is simple. Figure out what this poll tells us. How seriously do people take these ideas? And maybe more importantly, how does that view change based on, who you ask politically?
And what jumps out right away is this gap, right, between people thinking he might be serious versus actually supporting the idea.
Exactly. It's like, okay, maybe they believe he means it, but do they want it? That's the question.
This poll gives us a snapshot of how people are sort of processing these really big statements. Are they just noise or something else?
Okay, let's dive into that first one. The third presidential term. The big number here is 62%. That's the majority of Americans who think Trump is serious about running again.
Despite the 22nd Amendment.
Right, despite that huge constitutional hurdle saying presidents only get 2 terms.
It's pretty telling about the political mood, isn't it? That so many people see it as a real possibility, even with the Constitution saying no.
But then you look closer.
Yeah, the partisan split is fascinating.
It really is. Fewer than 4 in 10 Republicans actually think he's serious about it.
Which is low, considering.
Compared to, 6 in 10 independents and almost 9 in 10 Democrats. They seem much more convinced.
It really makes you wonder about the different perspectives there. Maybe for some Republicans it's wishful thinking, or maybe they just don't want to think about the constitutional fight.
Could be. And for Democrats and independents, maybe it taps into bigger worries about, democratic norms being challenged.
And you've got those tangible things, too. The Trump Organization actually selling Trump 2028 merchandise.
Right. That T-shirt even says, rewrite the rules.
And Trump himself making these kind of vague comments about methods. It adds fuel to the fire, suggesting it's not just talk.
But actually doing it, overturning the 22nd Amendment, that's a mountain to climb.
Oh, absolutely. You'd need 2/3 of the House and the Senate.
Plus 3/4 of the states to ratify it.
It's designed to be incredibly difficult.
And the poll shows people aren't really pushing for it. Only 18% of U.S. adults actually support a third term.
And get this, even among Republicans, a majority, 60%, are against the idea.
So belief he's serious, high. Actual support for it, pretty low, even in his own party.
Yeah, that disconnect is key.
Okay, moving on to something that feels, well, even more intense. This idea of deporting or imprisoning U.S. citizens abroad.
The poll found most Americans think Trump is serious about this, too. They mentioned his advice to El Salvador's president about building prisons.
What stood out to you there?
The fact that belief in his seriousness cuts across party lines. Majorities of Democrats, Republicans, and independents all think he means it.
That is striking. Maybe it shows a general perception of his willingness to push boundaries.
Could be. And of course, legally, it's a non-starter. Immigration experts are crystal clear.
Yeah.
You can't just deport U.S. citizens or send them to foreign prisons. It's illegal.
Right. But again, we see that belief versus support gap. Well, lots of people think he's serious.
Actual support is way down. Only 32% overall.
But look at the partisan breakdown on this one.
Yeah, it's sharp. 57% of Republicans support it.
Wow. Compared to just 30% of independents and only 12% of Democrats.
It really shows how differently these proposals land depending on your political viewpoint. It's fascinating how rhetoric works, isn't it? People believe he's serious, even when the action itself seems legally impossible.
The power of the message, maybe.
Yeah, shaping perceptions.
Okay, let's pivot. Greenland. The poll says 68% of people think Trump is serious about trying to take over Greenland.
And again, similar levels of belief across the parties on this one. Democrats, Republicans, independents, they mostly agree he's serious.
Maybe because he talked about buying it before, it wasn't exactly subtle.
Right. His previous interest was very public, and his, let's say, unconventional diplomatic style probably plays into it. Remember those comments about going as far as we have to?
And he even said yes when asked about using military force, right?
Exactly. That kind of talk likely contributes to why so many think he's serious.
But wanting to actually do it? Forcefully taking Greenland, support plummets.
Way down. Only 22% of Americans overall are for it.
And even among Republicans, while it's higher than average, it's still less than half 45%.
Plus, you have the very clear opposition from Denmark, and importantly, from the people who live in Greenland.
It really highlights that difference again, acknowledging someone might want to do something versus actually endorsing it.
People might recognize a certain boldness or willingness to float wild ideas, but that doesn't mean they support it, especially when it involves another country's sovereignty.
Okay, last one. Let's head north. Canada.
Ah, Canada.
The poll found just over half of Americans think Trump is serious about seizing control of Canada.
But this is where the partisan divide really explodes. It's dramatic.
Yeah, tell me about it. 75%, three-quarters of Democrats believe he's serious.
Compared to only 35% of Republicans, that's a huge gap. Independents are kind of in the middle at 49%.
What do you make of that huge difference?
Well, it probably reflects how different groups interpret his past comments and actions, especially towards allies. Calling Canada the 51st state.
Or referring to Prime Minister Trudeau as the governor.
Yeah, those kinds of remarks likely land very differently depending on your political leanings. Democrats might see a pattern, Republicans might dismiss it as rhetoric.
But when you ask about support for taking over Canada...
Oh, it craters. This is the idea that gets the most pushback across the board.
A massive 86% of Americans disagree with it.
And importantly, that includes 71% of Republicans. Even his own party strongly rejects this one.
It seems like there's a line, especially with a close neighbor and ally like Canada. The poll mentioned general disapproval of heavy-handed actions towards neighbors, too.
Precisely. That near-universal opposition, even within the GOP, shows a fundamental respect, I think, for the U.S.-Canada relationship and a rejection of aggression against such a close partner.
So wrapping this up, this poll paints a really complex picture. A lot of Americans seem to believe Trump is serious about these, well, pretty controversial ideas.
Yeah, from a third term to the citizen imprisonment idea to Greenland and Canada, belief in seriousness is often quite high.
But then actual support for these actions is often much, much lower, especially, it seems, for taking over Canada.
And running through it all are these really significant partisan divides in perception. How people see these statements seems heavily influenced by their political affiliation.
It definitely leaves you with something to chew on.
And maybe the key question for you, the listener, is this. What does this pattern, believing the rhetoric, but not supporting the action, plus the deep partisan splits, tell us about our current political climate?
Yeah, what shapes how we perceive political statements, even the really improbable ones?
And what are the implications if people start believing or disbelieving these kinds of extraordinary claims? It's worth thinking about how that affects political discourse and maybe even our expectations moving forward.